Hey guys, so this quick tip Houdini tutorial and video is going to discuss the new Houdini packages system. This was added in Houdini 17.5. It's something similar if you guys are coming from Maya as the modules system. So it's a individual file that points to your plugins. And so some of you guys have trouble with the environment file. So in Houdini, wherever your documents and Houdini environment file is, a lot of people are used to when they install Redshift, and we're going to use Redshift and RenderMan as an example here. You have to come in here inside of your Houdini environment file, wherever your documents and Houdini install is located, and you have to come in here and edit your Houdini paths and point them to Redshift and RenderMan or Mops, whatever plugins you have in here, right? And so this, after a while, when you have several of these, it can get a little confusing and difficult to just, I want to edit only one plugin. You got to open this up, kind of look around, dig in here and find, let's say I needed to change to a new Redshift plugin, and you got to find the Redshift plugin in here, and then you got to point it to the new Houdini version or whatever, right? This could take a little bit of work, and it's a little more confusing, and if you mess up one of these, you can mess up the whole thing. And so the side effects devs decided to add this new system called packages, and it makes this process a lot easier, where you don't have to complicate adding all these Houdini environment variables to get your plugins to load, and it makes management a lot easier. So if you just Google Houdini package, you'll get this page here. And so this page explains the Houdini package system. So it'll give you an overview. It'll talk about how it's used as a means to add plugins or remove plugins without editing your Houdini environment file. It'll give you an example. Here's some examples of how it works, the syntax. And you'll also get a list of the options here. So you have enable, disable, using expressions, how all of it works. So I recommend you guys actually look at this yourselves and kind of get accustomed to some of these settings. And I'm going to actually show you guys how to write your own. And so let's move this out of the way. So in order to get this going, I'm going to show you the easiest way to start using packages. And actually, I'll link to my Patreon a zip file with an example of my packages, so you guys could download them yourselves and edit them if it's a little too confusing, and you could explore them yourselves. So actually, I already have a packages folder in here, so I'm actually going to not delete this. I'm going to just drag this out, so we could start. Oops, what's going on here? It's open. Oh, it's open in my text document. Hold on. Let's move that out of the way. So we're going to start fresh here. And actually, our Houdini environment, we're going to close this, and we're going to use a different one we have. And actually, let's rename this just Houdini environment back as for backup. And we're going to use this Houdini environment, which I've already edited, which is simplified. As you guys can see, it's not even loading Redshift or anything because I have the comment hash on here. So the only things that are actually being loaded by this environment variable is the Megascans and the game dev tools, just because these two update automatically when you update Megascans or the game dev tools. So it'll automatically replace it with the newest ones, but everything else I removed, right? So right now, if I cut this and paste it in here, and actually I don't have Arnold installed, so okay, that's commented out. And so right now, if I were to launch Houdini, we wouldn't have Redshift or RenderMan or any of that stuff working. So let's launch Houdini, and if we move this over here, let's shrink this down. Oops. We'll get an error that pops up on the Houdini console, and it's going to say no MOPS shelf, no Redshift shelf. And that's because I had Redshift and MOPS shelves installed earlier. And you'll notice up here, I don't have Redshift or RenderMan on the top options. I only have Quixel Megascans, and that's because that's installed. I don't have Deadline or anything like that. And so the MOPS shelf is empty, and my Redshift shelf is empty. And that's the reason is because our environment variables obviously aren't set because I removed them. Now, so let's just close this. So how can we load the plugins in directly without editing our Houdini environment, so we could keep this empty and neat and using the new package system? So in order to do that, we'll just right click. We're going to make a new folder. And this new folder has to be called packages. And Houdini will automatically detect this new folder and search it inside of it for a package file. So if we jump in here, what we need to do is make a new text document, and we'll just save it as a JSON file. And so all the packages have to be saved in JSON format. So let's just make a new text document, and we'll just call this Redshift plugin. Keep in mind also that the name, it loads the plugins in alphabetical order. So Redshift is an R, so this will be loaded after. Actually, no, the RenderMan. Let's say I just called this, I don't know, MOPS or something. MOPS would load first before Redshift because it's in the alphabetical order, and M comes first. So we need to make sure this is a JSON file. So let's edit the extension, and now it's a JSON file. And you can edit this with just the regular old Notepad or whatever text editor. I personally prefer to use Notepad++, which kind of is like more of a coding friendly notepad. And so now that we've got this open, we need to add our information that we would be to point to our plugin. So in order to open up the this statement here, we need to use a not a bracket, the squiggly bracket. So it's not a regular bracket, it's the squiggly bracket. And actually, let me see if I can zoom in here. There we go. So that way you guys can see this better. So regular bracket, squiggly bracket. So we need to open this with the squiggly bracket, and we're going to have to set this so it knows that it's an environment. So env, close quotes. And this tells Houdini, and let's just hit the tab key here. This tells Houdini that this is an environment path that we're pointing to. And we're now going to use a regular bracket. And we're going to point this to our Houdini path that we would use normally. So if you were to open up your, actually let's make this capitals, Houdini path, close quotes. So in your environment variables, if you look up like the how to install Redshift for Houdini, you'll see that you need a Houdini path and you need a path. One pointing to the Redshift bin folder, the install directory, and the Houdini path needs to point directly to your Redshift plugin. So depending on what version of Redshift you have installed, you're going to need to put that in here. So we're going to use this. Let's zoom out a little bit. Actually, let's expand this so you guys can see it more. So I'm using the Redshift plugin for 360. And so it's going C, program data, inside of the Redshift plugins folder, Houdini, and the version of the Houdini plugin you need. And then we have quotation marks to encapsulate that. And now we need to close out this statement. So we need to use another one of these squiggly brackets since we opened it here. And we're going to close, oops. close that out. And you'll notice this is one of the things I like about Notepad++. It'll highlight when statements get closed out like this, so that I know this is now a closed section of the directory that we're pointing to. And so then we're going to add a comma. And we need now to point our path. So again, we're going to use another squiggly bracket. We're going to use the quotation, path, close quote, and colon. And now we need to point it to the program's, the Redshift bin directory. So let's do quotation, and I'll just paste it in here, since that's the location of my Redshift plugin bin. Close quote, and then close it off again using the squiggly bracket. And that should be it. So now these are closed off, and this is closed off. And now we need to close the environment section. So we need to add a closing bracket. Oops, that's a squiggly bracket, a regular bracket. And you'll notice how it highlights up here and down here. So it's letting us know that this is all encapsulated now. And finally, we need to close everything out. So we'll close everything out using this, the squiggly bracket. And let's just close it out over here so it's easier to notice, since we know it's on the left. And so if we save this, let's hit the save button. We'll now have the Redshift plugin JSON inside of our packages folder. So now if I load Houdini up, and actually let's do one more example. Let's do the mops example, since that gave us an error earlier. So let's make a new text document in here. Actually, let's reuse this. So we're gonna save as. So we're gonna go save as, and we'll call this mops. Since mops requires us to point to a certain path, and if you guys read how to install mops, you'll know what location you could use and what variables. So I keep my mops install here, just inside of the 17.5, under a folder named mops master, which is taken straight directly from the GitHub. You can name this whatever you want, and I just copy and paste, replace this when I update. And so we need to edit this now to point in here and scan for our toolbar and our OTLs. So let's come back up here. So we're going to edit this. We want this to say mops, since that's what we're looking for. And actually, let's copy and paste this, since we're going to need 3 rows. This path down here needs to be the Houdini OTL scan path. And so this tells Houdini where to scan for OTLs. So Houdini OTL scan path. And we also need to tell Houdini where to check for toolbars. So Houdini toolbar path. And now we need to tell it where to look for these things. So the mops folder I showed you guys earlier. I'm just going to copy paste the directory. There it is, documents Houdini 17.5 mops master. Cool. The next thing we need to look up is the mops OTL scan path. And so since we already created our mops directory, we can now use this as the variable to search inside of this mops folder for the OTLs and the toolbar, rather than having to type an absolute directory. So that would work also if we wrote, you know, documentation or documents Houdini 17.5 mops master / OTLs, you know, but we're going to use the variable, the environment variable that we created up here, the mops variable first. So the new location we're going to search is we're going to use $ to tell it that this is a variable, mops. And so it's going to search inside of mops, and we need it to search OTL S, and that's our OTLs folder in here. And we're going to just close this out with a semicolon. And we need to use the @/OTLS close, or the quote's already closed actually. And that will cover that. And for the next one, we need to do the same thing, except instead of pointing to the OTLs folder, we're searching for toolbar. And we're going to close that out, use the @ sign again, /toolbar. And let's save this. And so that should cover the same thing. And so if I were to open up our old backup, let's see, our backup environment variable here. Edit with Notepad. You'll notice that, where's mops? We have mops. So our old environment variable was using the same thing, as you guys can see. The OTL scan path, OTLs, toolbar, etc., etc. The only difference now is that we're isolating it so we don't get all the other stuff mixed in there, right? And let's actually do one more. Let's save as again. And let's pick RenderMan. We'll just save this for RenderMan. And now we're going to point to RenderMan. So let's switch this over. Again, we need now a Houdini path. Oops. And we need to point this to where RenderMan is currently installed. Now, you could point this directly, or you could use the RenderMan RFH tree variable and then point it there first if you want. So we'll do it that way just because that's the variable way. So if you come down here, let's make this RFH tree. And if you're wondering where I'm getting the RFH tree and stuff, this is in the documentation for RenderMan when you install it. So if you read the documentation how to install RenderMan, you'll see these variables that you need to point to, and it'll give you the instructions of where they're usually installed by default and where to point things to if you don't know where they are. We need the RenderMan tree, and so up here we're going to point this to our RenderMan for Houdini plugin. So this is where it's installed in this location for me. It says C program files Pixar RenderMan for Houdini 22.6. And we need to also tell it where the RenderMan Pro server is for the RenderMan tree section, and that is installed in this location for me. That's the default Windows installation. The great thing about, like I mentioned, about using this also is later on, let's say RenderMan updates to version 27. All you have to do is just come in here and switch this to 27, and you're done. And save the file, and Houdini will open it up back up. And so you don't, it makes things cleaner and easier to edit without having to open up the entire environment variable list and edit, get lost in all the options and stuff and possibly break things. And finally, all we got to do is the Houdini path just needs to be pointed to the RFH tree variable, which we created down here, /17.5. And if we save this, let's close that out. We should now be good to go. So if we check our packages folder, we'll now have 3 packages in here: the RenderMan JSON, the Redshift plugin JSON, and the Mops plugin JSON. So now if we load up Houdini, we should, and actually we got an error. So if you come up here to the console will tell you what's being loaded. So here it's saying what's being loaded, error syntax in the Mops plugin, and it's telling me that I forgot comma here. The Redshift plugin loaded normally, and then it's saying that the RenderMan load is giving me an error, and it's missing a comma also. And actually, it is. So I forgot to add the comma up here after this bracket so that it load. The comma is necessary to tell it load this first, then load this next. I had a comma already up here, but I forgot to add one here. So let's save this, and actually let's open up the mops plugin also, and let's add a comma right there. So now it's going to load this, then comma, load this, comma, load this, then close. Okay, now if we save this and let's reload Houdini here, the console did not spit out any errors this time. And if we come up here, you'll notice now here's our mops tools, and let's actually just drop down something just to make sure everything's working. Jump in here, start typing mops, and indeed here are all our mops nodes. The Redshift tab is also working and showing up under our shelves. We should have our RenderMan 22 shelf. Here it is. We got our Redshift tab here and RenderMan here. Awesome. So everything is now loaded in and working as expected. So that's how you could use the new package system to organize individual plugins. This makes it so much easier to manage when one plugin updates and something else hasn't, without having to go into your environment variables, look around for things, and then risk breaking all your environments by accidentally deleting something, or this also fires a warning in the console telling you exactly what broke where. It's just a lot easier to manage. So for you guys, I'm gonna save a zip file with examples, and I'm gonna just type in right here like your username, and I'm gonna save them this way so you guys can edit them yourselves in your own way. So let's actually save this, and yeah, so hopefully you guys now got an idea of how this works and end up using this system. I think it's superior over editing environment variables. There's more options and controls too. Just read the documentation. This is just like a basic introduction, how to use this to install plugins and not use the environment variable system anymore. And yeah, thanks again guys for all the support on Patreon and YouTube. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you guys learned something new using this. Thanks.